Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's jump right in. Today we're unpacking episode 02, DaVinciA Plus and the Architecture Trinity. We're going to demystify exactly how we transition away from the wild, probabilistic AI hype we've seen over the last few years and step firmly into the era of deterministic, evidence-based systems. Because look, if you're building or using AI in any kind of regulated space, the whole black box excuse simply doesn't cut it anymore. We need structure, and we absolutely need certainty. Which brings us to the absolute core ethos of our entire approach: intelligence that can be explained. This simple phrase is literally the heritage standard we must demand from AI in regulated enterprise environments. It's really about designing systems from the ground up where every single choice, every parsed data point, and every final output is completely traceable.
So here's our blueprint for today. We'll hit 1, the crisis of ungoverned AI. 2, the architecture trinity. 3, mapping the EU AI Act. 4, BAIR, which is our reference deployment. And finally, 5, advise, but humans decide.
Section 1. The Crisis of Ungoverned AI. The Risks of Probabilistic AI. So why exactly is the current generation of autonomous, probabilistic AI such a massive liability for compliance? Well, to put it simply, when behavior emerges from learned patterns rather than rigid code, it acts as a black box. It becomes basically impossible to figure out why an AI system made a specific decision. Imagine using a system like that for a major hiring decision, or worse, in a healthcare setting. If you can't assess the exact reasoning path that led to a specific recommendation, you are holding a massive, unquantifiable regulatory liability. And this lack of structure, it leads directly to what we call the 3 anti-patterns of ungoverned AI. First up, scope drift. That's where an AI wanders way outside its intended boundaries just because those boundaries weren't strictly defined. Second, reasoning path collapse. This is where the system completely loses its decision-making trail, which makes audits literally impossible. And third, uncontrolled delegation loops. That's where multiple AI agents just hand tasks off to one another in the background without any structured routing or permission checks. These 3 anti-patterns are the absolute enemy of governance. Section 2, the Architecture Trinity, the DaVinciA Plus blueprint. Now, to solve those anti-patterns, we don't need larger or more complex AI models. Actually, we need to do the opposite. We need to strip the model of its autonomy using a completely different architectural structure. Take a look at the 15-node governance spine mapped out here. We have the validation lifecycle, installation qualification, operational qualification, and performance qualification. We're essentially borrowing the rigorous standards of high-reliability industries, think pharma or aviation, and applying them directly to AI. It transforms AI from a volatile liability into a governed, structured asset that scales right alongside your organization's maturity. This entire roadmap relies on the architecture trinity. It's essentially 3 layers that fully encapsulate the language model. Layer 1 is identity and intent. Think of this as the first unpassable gate that formally defines exactly what the system is allowed to do, immediately stopping that scope drift we just talked about. Layer 2 is knowledge and logic. This governs the internal machinery, acting as a deterministic routing engine that explicitly defines the data sources and the tools the system can actually use. And finally, Layer 3 is oversight and audit. This is an immutable, append-only ledger that captures every single event in real time. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is this uncompromising mandate. AI must not act unless it is allowed to act. And this isn't just some nice philosophy, it's a hard engineering reality enforced by strict SQL gates. Before an AI reasoning node is ever invoked in the DaVinciA Plus framework, the system queries a secure relational database just to check if the action is explicitly allowed. If that SQL query doesn't return true, the AI does absolutely nothing. End of story. Section 3, mapping the EU AI Act, operationalizing regulatory alignment. So how does this trinity translate into actual alignment with incoming global legislation? Well, the EU AI Act is setting the absolute gold standard for global AI governance, and organizations have to respond structurally, not just legally. You can see the direct conceptual mapping right here. Layer 1's focus on intent maps perfectly to the Act's Article 10, which is all about risk management and data governance. Layer 2 maps straight to Articles 11 and 13, covering transparency and technical documentation. And Layer 3, it maps right onto Articles 12 and 14, demanding logging and human oversight. We are literally translating high-level legal text into repeatable operational engineering practices. And here is the major paradigm shift you really need to grasp. The old way, just claiming your system is safe, declarative assertion. But the new way, the DaVinciA Plus way, is structural evidence. Remember, DaVinciA Plus isn't a certification scheme in itself. Rather, it's the operational discipline that generates the immutable, cryptographic evidence of alignment that regulators are going to demand. When an auditor asks how your system works, you don't just hand them a shiny marketing brochure, you hand them a mathematically verifiable evidence pack.
Section 4, BAIR, the reference deployment, the framework in reality.
Theory is great and all, but let's look at how this functions in a real-world, high-stakes environment, like recruitment. Meet BAIR. This is the grumpy scout archetype who embodies our framework with wry, no-nonsense confidence. BAIR spots talent early, sees right through the nonsense, and values total reliability. The tagline really says it all. Recruiting the right people, no koalas, no drama. BAIR basically takes the complex DaVinciA Plus governance architecture and wraps it up in a trusted, working-class confident persona. But beneath the tracksuit, BAIR is pure architectural discipline. By applying the Trinity, BAIR uses rigid SQL gating at Layer 1 to ensure he never ever strays from his recruitment boundaries. Down at Layer 2, highly specific, version-controlled knowledge tools dictate exactly how reasoning occurs, which completely prevents any unpredictable, black box hiring evaluations. And at Layer 3, immutable JSON-B audit logs track every single microstep of a candidate's evaluation journey. It literally transforms recruitment from an opaque, risky process into a highly traceable, totally governed operation. And this governed structure extends right through to the brand's formal corporate applications. Just notice this clean monogram logo, anchored by the core brand values: better fit, authentic search, integrity, and results. It perfectly projects trust and intelligence at every single level, proving that heavy enterprise governance doesn't have to look dry and sterile. It can look distinct, memorable, and above all, expensive. Section 5. Advise, but humans decide. The ultimate safeguard. Because at the end of the day, no matter how perfect the architecture is, the buck has to stop somewhere. I advise, humans decide. This statement perfectly encapsulates the absolute mandatory human-in-the-loop requirement. It is the real bedrock of responsible AI. The system does the heavy lifting, sure. It evaluates the complex data, it cross-references the logic, but the AI is a tool for human judgment, never, ever a replacement for it. The human is always the final accountable authority.
So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. If an auditor walked into your office tomorrow, could your AI system cryptographically prove exactly how it made its last 1,000 decisions? Really think deeply about that as you architect your systems for the future. Because very soon, intelligence that cannot be explained will be intelligence you simply cannot use. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 02, and until next time, keep building with structure.